Assalamu alaikum viewers, welcome to lecture 24 of International Marketing subject. In our previous lecture, we discussed a very important and increasingly used mode of entry into international markets, that was licensing. That is the agreement or a contract under which the licensor allows the licensee, another firm, perhaps in another market, to use the patents, the technologies, the brand, firm name, or any other intellectual asset of the licensor for a fee or for any other arrangement, like perhaps percentage of sales. Franchising is a form of licensing. We are very familiar with the word franchising, and we often use in our everyday language also franchising. So franchising is a form of licensing. In franchising, not only there is a licensing agreement for use of patents, intellectual properties, brand names, and such assets by the licensee from the licensor in return for certain payments of fees or percentage of sales. In franchising, the licensor is also involved substantially, significantly in the way the licensor does the business. So licensor imposes on the licensee significantly and gets involved with the licensee in the way business is conducted, the way business is done. So franchising is a licensing agreement in which not only the licensor allows the licensee to use the intellectual asset, intellectual property, but the licensee has also to agree to conduct the business in a certain way, in a certain format. Now, such franchises can be of two categories. One is business name franchise, in which there is not so much of standardization in terms of the way business is conducted. We see such business name franchises often in areas of selling gasoline, petrol. We can see such franchises in selling pharmaceutical products. We can see such franchising also in selling branded apparel and in many other areas. The second type of franchise, which is more common, is business format franchise, in which the franchisor enforces the franchisee to sell and to adopt a very standardized selling method. We see such franchises in retail of fast foods, in concept stores for branded apparel, and in many other areas where there is standardization around the world, the way products are sold, these services are provided. 75% of franchises worldwide are business format franchises, in which the franchisee has to abide by and the standard practices, the standard way of selling, the standard format of selling products as agreed with the franchisor. And now this again is very, very rapidly expanding throughout the world. In our own country, we are seeing new and new franchises being set up in fast food, in fashion retailing, and in pharmaceutical retailing, and in other products. Successful international franchises are increasingly coming to our markets. In developed countries, in industrialized countries, this is even more intense. In every type of retailing, most successful chains are those which are franchise chains. The franchise agreements are just like licensing agreements, but certainly they are more complex, more detailed, because they involve, on top of use of intellectual properties and assets, it also involves agreement with respect to how to sell the products and services in a standardized way. So the franchisor, who is a licensor, in this case, is more deeply involved on continuous basis with the franchisee or licensee, because franchising is a form of licensing. So agreement can be single unit franchising, that the franchisor has allowed the franchisee, or the franchisee has engaged in a contract with the franchisor to operate only one retail unit. Or it can be multiple unit franchising, that the franchisee is allowed to open many retail outlets in agreed upon locations, agreed upon regions. Franchising may also involve conversion of previous businesses. Sometimes the party is already involved in a type of business, maybe in fast food retailing, or selling pharmaceutical products, or merchandising fashion apparel, and agrees to convert its retail concept into the agreed upon format and convert it to a franchise. So such arrangements will be called conversion franchising. International franchising often involves master franchising agreement, that a firm, the franchisee, may sign a contract with the franchisor to seek rights to open franchised outlets in whole of the country. So gets a master franchise for a region, for a country, and then subcontracts to other parties to open, or may itself proceed to open many franchised outlets in the region, in the country that is been agreed in the franchise contract. Well, we are familiar with some of the more well-known such franchises in fast food, in fashion retailing, which we see very successful worldwide. And many firms are very keen to get such franchise rights, such franchise opportunities. And hence, for good, successful franchise chains, there are always many prospects who are willing to pay, who are willing to apply, who are willing to become potential franchisees for those very successful franchise concepts. The few we see around us in fast foods, in fashion retailing, in other areas. But then there are many franchise options which are not so well known, not so successful. In order to make their franchises attractive to the potential franchisees, these franchisers then evolve into what we call as creative franchising, maybe money back guarantee. Because franchising involves a lot of investments, even from the franchisee itself. To open a franchise fast food outlet, the franchisee has to invest often into the location, into the construction, into the whole format. So a lot of investment, upfront investment is required, hence a lot of risk. For very well-known brands, very well-known franchises, franchisee may be feeling less risk. But for new and not so well-known franchise options, the franchisees or the potential franchisees may be very reluctant to invest. In such cases, the franchisor may have to offer additional benefits or guarantees or securities in order to make its franchise an appealing franchise option for the franchisees, through money back guarantees, through joint partnership investments, and other perks. So these type of franchises or franchise options can be termed as creative franchise options. Just like we had discussed in our previous lecture on licensing, that proper steps have to be taken, mind have to be applied to make it sure that the licensing relationship survives and prospers. If for any reason the relationship breaks down, then both parties are the losers. Similarly, franchising is a licensing agreement, so it is imperative, it is essential that efforts must be done, care must be taken to ensure that this relationship also survives the test of time and survives well in changing, ever-changing environment. So one clear aspect here is that the franchising contract, it must be comprehensive, it must be cohesive, and must be adapted to the requirements of foreign countries. For international franchising, the environment in foreign countries may change. Since franchising involves a whole business format to be followed in a standardized way, and that is to be achieved in different world markets, as we see some of the famous franchises, successful franchises in fast foods. Now, if we go one country or another country or third country or another continent, we see more or less very standard, similar performance by staff, by environment, and by quality of goods that they supply. A very unified, very similar, very standardized performance. It looks very simple, or it may look very simple, but it is very difficult, very complex to deliver that sort of standardized performance in very diverse world markets, which are culturally very different, linguistically very different, where attitudes toward work may be very different, where business environments may be very different, where legal environments and regulations and standards may be very different. Accordingly, for a franchise arrangement to become successful, it must adapt very well to the local environment while still ensuring the level of standardization, standard performance that is required of a franchise on worldwide basis. So this involves very creative capabilities in developing contracts that balance both things, the type of adaptation that is required to successfully operate in different markets, at the same time be able to achieve the level of standardization that is needed of a franchised operations worldwide. The second aspect, which is a very, very critical aspect for success of an ongoing franchise relationship, is that the franchisor must be able to provide value to franchisee on an ongoing basis. Now, this is the test every successful franchise concept has to go through. Well, potentially, every way of selling or retailing has a potential to be franchised. We have pharmaceutical retailers, we have food retailers, we have apparel retailers, we have department stores, and multitude of retail formats we can see. Every format has a potential to be franchised. But then some are successful. Many are not successful. The key reason why some are successful is because the franchisor is able to provide value to franchisee on an ongoing basis. However, strong goodwill may exist between two parties. It is important that both parties must strongly feel the economic opportunities in their relationship, as hardly any relationship can survive in commercial world only through goodwill on an ongoing basis. So it's critical that franchisor must be able to deliver value to franchisee on an ongoing basis. To justify that, why should a franchise be paying fees and profits to franchisor on an ongoing basis if franchisor is not able to deliver a value? And that value must be so strong that the franchisee must feel the loss that franchisee would incur by breaking the relationship. So the driving factor here is the value on an ongoing basis that should be very strong, irreplaceable, non-substitutable. So when we see very successful franchise of fast foods, those are prevailing because the franchisors are able to provide value to franchisee on an ongoing basis. One, they have a very strong brand name. So franchisee can easily sell and make profit through those brand names. So franchisor makes an effort through marketing to create powerful brand name which attracts customers, which has brand loyalty. At the same time, it may not be possible for franchisee to create the quality of products and services without a continuous support from franchisor in terms of supply of raw materials, supply of products, supply of technological know-how, supply of design capabilities, supply of management training. It may not be the capacity of franchisee to train and recruit so capable managers and people for retail outlets without the help of the franchisor. So those franchisees are succeeding because the franchisors are providing ongoing value in form of strong brand names which attract a lot of customers, providing support through supplying materials, raw materials, merchandise to sell. At the same time, the franchisors are providing on an ongoing basis technological help through innovations, and help in management training and management processes. If such type of values are not being received on an ongoing basis, then the franchisee may feel what is the use and why should franchisee be paying profits to franchisor, and hence very difficult to sustain such relationships. So for firms which want to create viable franchises to sell around the world, they have also to see that in their processes, in their concepts, they will be able to create value on an ongoing basis. If it involves technologies, then once those technologies are transferred, and once that know-how is transferred, once that experience is transferred, once the franchisee is able to develop his own goodwill in his own market, then there is not much need of any further value from franchisor. Often that is the situation. So successful franchises are very creative operations. And at the end of the day, it is the brand which is the ultimate value. So every franchise operation which is successful, one of the key reasons has been strong branding. That the franchisors invested wisely into creating strong brands, in marketing those brands, in refreshing those brands, and hence having extensive customer loyalty, that people out there wanted to consume those brands, and hence ongoing value for the franchisee. So it is imperative, it is essential that franchisors invest into branding, develop superior marketing skills so that they can really create strong brands, and hence they can build customer traffic for their franchisees. And if franchisees disengage with those brands, would lose a lot of customers also, and hence franchisee would not want to disengage with the franchise. So that's the value, that's the sort of value which is required on an ongoing basis for the franchise relationship to succeed. Another essential component which we had discussed earlier in today's lecture is that the franchisee has to invest a lot of money at the onset, because franchise requires a whole concept to be put into place. If a fast food outlet has to be created, then it has to be totally constructed in its standardized concept, and which requires a lot of money. So the franchisor has to make it sure that such funds are available, because you cannot start a franchise with half constructed and maybe you think you can construct or later on expand it later on. No, that's not the case. That's not viable. Like this, franchises cannot have a standardized image, standardized looks. So it requires upfront investment, unlike licensing or simple licensing. So in any franchise operation, it has to be ensured that the franchisee or for the franchise operation, adequate funding is available, because without which the franchise operations cannot expand, cannot open new outlet. Again, like licensing here, a careful selection of franchises have to be done, and more so. One, they should not become future competitors. Second, to manage a franchise, to run a franchise requires a capability, because franchise operations are always sophisticated retail operations and require sophisticated management. So the franchisee or franchisee firm must have the capability, must have the sophisticated skills, managerial capabilities, financial capabilities, technical capabilities to run and establish the franchise operations as per the requirements of the franchisor. So here the selection of franchisees must be done in a very careful manner. Franchisor then has to provide support to franchisee on a continuous basis. The franchisee would need that support, marketing support, support of materials, support of management training, management recruitment, and other sort of essential support that will be needed on continuous basis. If that is not provided on continuous basis, then it will be difficult for franchise operations to operate smoothly. Since franchising requires often retailing and adopting a standardized format in a foreign country, it must adhere to and adapt to regulations and laws of the foreign country, the employment laws, the environmental laws, and other laws which are applicable to that sort of business. It is important, it is critical, it is essential that such operations must adhere to all the laws of all the markets and countries in which they want to operate. Because if they violate a law, then not only there are going to be penalties and consequences, at the same time it will bring in bad image to the franchise. Just like licensing, in franchising, two set of parties are involved, franchisor and the franchises. Now both parties have potential to gain and there are some potential risk for which they need to understand and they need to be careful. Now we're going to discuss first from the franchisor's point of view, the franchisor's balance in a franchise type of relationship. First, the positive factors, and among the positive factors, I think one of the more important factors is the demonstration effect. If a party has a good retail concept and goes on its own to expand, then it will be constrained by its own resources and capabilities. Well, a party may have a good retail concept, a good idea which is working very well in certain place, certain market. Now for that firm to quickly expand to the world has a lot of limitations. There's financial limitations, resource limitations, managerial limitations, and legal limitations, regulatory limitations, and there can be many other type of constraints. So it may end up opening more outlets very slowly. But if people in the world can only see few outlets of a brand, accordingly they will develop that sort of image. That is a small firm. But if people see a franchise everywhere they go, every city they go, like we see in some fast foods, we travel to any country, to any city, we see their outlets in the same standard format, selling same standard products with same standard levels of service. Very impressive. We call it demonstration impact. That if there are so many outlets everywhere around the world, accordingly they will create a major brand impact for that franchise. Not only it is going to enhance the image and impact of the brand, at the same time more people will become familiar with that brand, and if they're traveling to other markets, they will become customers. And this is happening because of the demonstration effect. More outlets in more places, better for the brand. More customers, more strong brand. So through franchising, a good retail format can expand very quickly. And if customers can see in all countries and can experience in all countries that brand frequently, then that brand will become more strong, will have more customers, more business. Hence it will allow rapid expansion of business also. That if a firm wants to expand on its own, it will be constrained in many ways. But if it forges alliances with other parties, they will bring their own money, their own expertise, their own effort, their own managerial capabilities, and hence a format or a franchise or a firm can quickly expand and open many outlets around the world. As we see that if there is a good franchise concept, there will be many parties willing to acquire that franchise from many countries. And then this concept can expand very rapidly to world markets through franchise. Franchisee also comes with their own financial contribution. Financing is often the biggest constraint for expansion, because for franchise to expand, a lot of money is required to construct each outlet, each franchise operation. Hence, a lot of funds, lot of resources will be required to expand to the world, to expand to every country around the globe. That is possible if there are strong parties from different markets, from different countries willing to acquire that franchise rights and willing to bring their money and willing to invest that money in opening outlets. If that works, then many outlets can be quickly opened with the help of financing from the franchisee themselves. In order to expand to international markets successfully, if a firm wants to do on its own, first it has to learn about the foreign markets, about the environment, about the culture, about the society, about the laws, about the regulation. And if a party does not become well familiar with these aspects, is bound to make many mistakes. And mistakes can be very costly. At the same time, when the organization becomes larger and larger and larger, it becomes more complex and more difficult to manage. There is a special difficulty in managing retail operations when they become too large based on small outlets, because retail involves cash transactions, and in retail a lot of people are employed who are getting low salaries, and they're not very highly educated. Mostly these are the people who are the sales staff. So to manage such large operations are very, very complex and very, very difficult, and sometimes impossible for one firm to do that. Let's take an example. If a firm has thousands of outlets around the world, where the products are being sold on cash every day, then to control that cash, trusted employees are needed, systems are needed. What if some products are sold and the cash is swindled? Very difficult to control. Again, the staff who is the frontline staff in retail operations is often not that well educated, low paid, and hence not that motivated to provide the standard good quality of service. So these are some of the complexities which make it very difficult for firms to manage many retail outlets through one organizational setup. Franchising is a very viable way to overcome these problems, because the franchisee brings his own management, his own capability. So there is a franchisor involved with number of franchisee firms. The franchisee firm itself is an ownership, an independent entity, where the owner or the manager is managing small number of retail outlets, and that he can do efficiently and effectively. Franchise operations allows firms to expand retail business in thousands and in many countries, which is very, very difficult and tricky for one organization to achieve, to manage across nation, across boundaries. Sometimes countries don't have good relationships. We can take example of countries in our region also. What if a franchise has to expand its operation into another country where the relationship between countries are adverse? In that case, if there is a breach of agreement, if the salesman in that country has run away with the cash, it will be very difficult to recover. These type of things do exist all the time. Hence, lot of difficulties for a retail firm especially to expand its businesses through smaller outlets around the world. So franchising remains the most viable way to do that. So franchisee not only brings their funds and financing, but they also bring in their own management effort, their skills and their persons, and hence whole setup can be efficiently and effectively managed. The franchisee also bring in their local knowledge, because they are from that country, that location, so they know the culture, they know the people, they know the regulations, and hence no need for franchisor to spend time and effort to learn about the market first before expanding operations in that market. So if franchisee is a successful firm, is a person who is capable, or a firm which has the knowledge, then the firm brings that knowledge, that experience, that expertise, that involvement in foreign market for the franchise operation. And franchise operation can be then quickly and successfully expanded to foreign markets without any delay of time or waste of resources. Now, since the funds are being shared, one firm does not have to bring in all the funds and resources and does not have to take all the risk. So in franchise operation, the franchisor is offering a franchise, and franchises is bringing often its own funds to open the retail outlets in its own designated market area. So lot of resources and financing and funds are being brought in by the franchisees. At the same time, the franchisees are bringing their own effort, their own motivation, their own knowledge about their markets, their own links, their own connections. Together, the whole setup becomes less risky to expand. There are a lot of risk to expand to foreign markets. There would be increased risk if more money is invested. Now, since franchisor has a help and partnership of parties which know foreign markets very well, and since the franchisees are bringing their own financing and funds, so less risk, less complications, less problem for franchisor to expand into those markets. So these are some of the key benefits, the positive aspects for franchisor to expand into world market through franchising. But then there are some risks and negative aspects also. One, of course, is lacks ultimate control, as we had discussed in licensing, that through franchising, through that contract, the right to sell the products in that market has now been passed on to the franchisee, and franchisor has less of a control over management, over brand, and other aspects of business in that market. That may increase complexities of managing the brands, achieving standardized service standards, and these type of things because of less and reduced control. There are also demands on training, because the franchisor would want the franchise operations to be very standardized, very modern. And franchisee will always demand training and support from franchisor on ongoing basis. So franchisor must be able to provide. That involves costs, and that involves establishing an organization to deliver that sort of support to franchisee. The third aspect which is important here is concerning the intellectual property. Since franchise contract involves franchising of a brand, franchising of a format, a business process, which are all intellectual property rights. So intellectual property right and its protection can become an issue if those rights have been given to a franchisee, especially when in foreign markets, if the enforcement of intellectual property rights, enforcement of contractual obligation is not that strong. So that can be a major risk for the franchisor. Creating future competitors is always going to remain a problem, because over time the franchisee will become more and more experienced in managing and running that type of retail operations. And there's always a potential that a franchisee, after learning that aspect of business, may start its own business in similar way, in similar area, and hence can become a competitor. Just like licensing, the franchisor may face a situation where franchisee is misusing the intellectual property rights through that contract, because often the franchise operations are at distant location around the world in other countries, and it is difficult for a franchisor to monitor every aspect of business of its franchisee. And some franchisee then may opt to misuse brands and mismanage. That is always a risk. Well, when we bring in partnerships, alliances, there is always a sharing of profit. So when franchisee is working hard, when franchisees bring his own funds, the franchisee want to make profits also. That's where a problem for franchisor, that by involving other parties, by involving franchisee, it has to share the profitability. If it's a very strong franchise, able to earn handsome profits, but through franchise agreements, then the profit has to be shared between franchisee and franchisor. That is something which has to be clearly understood by the franchisor. Similarly, franchisee faces numerous opportunities and numerous risks in engaging into a franchise agreement. One of the best things which a franchisee may get from having a good franchise is a strong brand name. As we have seen in case of fast food chains, there are some well-known franchises. So the parties which were able to get those franchise for our market were able to earn good money, had a successful start, because the brands were known around the world, respected around the world, famous around the world. So customers were ready to spend money for those brands. So as soon as the franchises were opened in our country, there was no problem in making profit, in making money, no risk in that aspect. So the franchisees, by acquiring those franchises for their markets, could be very confident that it's going to make money because it is a reputed brand, is a well-known brand, and the customers are there and they will be willing to spend money on this brand. So that is one of the key benefits of acquiring a well-known, very well-respected, famous franchise, that there will be little risk, if any, in making profits, making the franchise successful. The second positive aspect for franchisee is the support the franchisee will get in form of training, management support, marketing support, and other support from franchisor on an ongoing basis. The firms which have launched successful franchises are also very efficient and effective in supporting their franchisees. These firms are providing marketing support, training support, management support, technological support, all sorts of supports. So franchisee not only acquires a good brand, but also develops a supporting relationship with a very, very strong international or multinational firm, and that multinational firm then provides training and support to the franchisee, and hence franchisee doesn't need to invest into those processes, does not need to acquire those skills from somewhere else, as the franchisor will be providing lots of training and support along with the franchise itself. As a result, low failure rate. If it's a successful franchise brand, well, it is a tested, tried brand. The franchisee can see that it's already successful in other markets, that there's already a strong brand loyalty present, and the franchisor is a strong, reputed, respected multinational firm. In that case, the risks are low in acquiring that franchise and investing funds into establishing retail outlets for that franchise. So this will always be low failure rate. The franchise in these cases can expect to be modern always, because the franchisor firm is an established firm, is a reputed firm, is a modern firm, will always be conducting research and development, will always be in the forefront of innovation in that area, and hence the franchisee can expect to remain modern, remain most innovative by virtue of the support the franchisee gets from a very capable, very advanced, modern franchisor firm. The franchisee may also get financing support, maybe direct financing support from the franchisor firm in some cases, but by also virtue of the fact that the franchise agreement has been done, and this is a franchise of a well-known brand which is going to face low risks of success, the banks in the franchisee country will be more willing to loan funds for this a very established, very tested and tried business venture, and hence it will be easy for a franchisee to acquire financing for the purpose of this established finance for a franchise operation in its own country. As a result, the ultimate benefit of franchisee is that the business is owned in its market by the franchisee. If I have acquired a well-known franchise for my own market, then I'm the owner of those operations. Those retail outlets are owned by me. But still I'm linked to a global multinational or large firm or a large brand. So it brings the benefits of both worlds. The entrepreneur, the owner, is the owner of the business, but is yet linked to a global chain, is linked to a global multinational. So it's best of both worlds. Links with a very established global chain multinational firms, and yet independent and entrepreneurial in owning own business, the franchise business in own country. So it brings the best of both worlds. But then there are also trade-offs. There are also risks of such relationship, as there are always trade-offs and risks with every other relationship. The foremost is if it is inappropriate or unknown franchise. We are familiar with some very well-known franchises that we see around us. But these are only very few options. In most cases, the franchises that are available are not that well-known or unfamiliar to a foreign market. Again, in our country, we have seen such cases that there were franchises which were very successful in Western countries, and our local parties went to acquire. Now, some of those franchises proved to be successful in our country, but others did not, for various reasons, maybe cultural reasons. Maybe those were unfamiliar franchise brands in our markets, even when they were very successful in their own home countries or other countries of the world. So that risk can always be there, that the certain franchise concepts may become inappropriate for certain markets. So the franchisee may have invested a lot of money in acquiring those franchises, may end up not earning much money or may end up incurring losses. So such risks are always there, even in case of such franchise brands which are very successful in other markets. The franchisees may also face exaggerated and deceptive claims, because the parties which are seeking franchises to sell their franchise operations are often exaggerating their claims that they are very well-known brand, a very successful firm, and these firms are, their franchises are making a lot of money in other markets, and to make it more appealing or to sell their franchise right more expensively to potential franchises. It is very difficult for a franchise to really know what is going on in terms of financial profits and sales in other markets. You have to rely on the assertions and presentation of the franchisor, because it's difficult to have access to the balance sheets and income statements of operations in other countries. So there can be a situation where the franchisor claims were exaggerated, were deceptive, in order to lure in the franchisee to invest more money to acquire those franchise rights with more funds, with more costs. So such deceptive claims and such inappropriate assertion can always be there and is a major risk for the franchisee. The third negative factor which franchisees may face is inadequate support with a lot of purchase requirements. It goes to the benefit of franchisor to engage the franchisee to buy more raw material, to buy more merchandise from the franchisor, so that franchisor can make more money, can sell more of its goods. But then the franchisor has also to provide support, and providing support costs money. So there can be a possibility that the franchisor enforces or entices the franchisee to buy more of its merchandise, while the franchisor is not able to provide the type of support that is needed because of various factors. So that risk is always there. So the franchisees, when they want to engage in a contract with the franchisor, with a potential franchisor, they must evaluate very, very carefully that what are the requirements for purchase that they have to buy from the franchisor, and at the same time whether the franchisor would be capable, would be able to provide the committed support or the needed support. Because the franchisee needs a lot of support on continuous basis from the franchisor, the marketing support, the training support, the management support that is needed in addition to the support in form of supplies and materials for franchisee to successfully operate. So that is a risk which is always there, and risk franchises may face, especially in case of more unknown, relatively new franchises that are there. The fourth factor is non-suitability of technical, managerial or marketing know-how. Since franchisee is maybe operating in another country, which is different on many aspects from the country of origin of the franchisor, and hence the franchisor may be unable to provide the desired type of technical, marketing, managerial support to the franchisee. Now that's an aspect which is always a risk, and the franchisee has to make it sure that the potential franchise will be able to provide the type of desired technical, managerial and other supports that are suitable, that are needed for the home market of the franchisee, because there are always differences in international markets. So firm may be capable to deliver certain things in one market and may not be capable to deliver similar things in another market, and those constraints are always there for franchisors and for potential franchise contract. The next important risk is that of security. There may be lack of security, because often franchise contracts involves laws of don'ts and laws of checks and balances and penalties. And in many franchise contracts, there is always a risk that the contract may be cancelled if franchisee is not able to deliver up to certain standards, and those standards may be set very high. So franchisee which has invested money, made trade-offs, always has a risk that for any reason, even for a small breach or disagreement, the franchisor may cancel the contract and may cancel the franchise. So that risk is always there. So franchisee may end up losing a lot because the investment is done. And often that investment is done into developing, creating a typical specific franchise concept. If a franchisee has investment or has invested a lot of money in location and in constructing a specific type of retail outlet as required by the franchisee, but for any reason that franchise agreement is cancelled, then all that money is gone waste, because there is no use for that construction, that equipment, that sort of retail concept. If some other business has to be established there, then a new construction perhaps needs to be done. So money invested into the first concept, the first type of retail format and its construction is all gone waste. So the risks are always there in form of contract, that the contract may be cancelled and investment may go down for the franchisee. There is always a need for excessive initial investment for the startup. As we have been discussing, in case of franchise operation, it is essential that the whole concept is constructed and the investment has to be done from the onset. We see franchise retail operations in fast food, in other areas, they are very fancifully constructed, very expensive construction. So to construct such facilities, a lot of funds are required. So excessive initial investment is required in case of starting franchise operations. So that also elevates the level of risk. Another major risk in case of franchise operation is proliferation of outlets. As we see, well, even these foreign franchise outlets started with one, then they opened next one, another one, another one. Now in our city, for these franchise, we see many outlets. Before it was only one outlet, and then all the customers from the city will flock to that outlet. But then as other outlets are also in the city, we see now that people are going to their nearest outlets, and hence the crowd which was patronizing the first few outlets has reduced somewhat. So that's always an issue with franchising, especially in case of successful franchise operations. As soon as a franchise becomes successful, there's always an incentive for a franchisor to allow opening of more outlets. If it is a single unit franchise to start with, that means the first owner is perhaps not owning the other franchise outlet that's opening in its own region or nearby locations. Well, captive area is always a deceptive concept. What is the captive area for a retail outlet? Well, if a retail outlet like an upmarket food outlet or an upmarket apparel outlet perhaps has a captive area for customer beyond even the city in which they are operating. If there is one major outlet of a known fast food in a city, then customers may be coming not just from all corners of the city, maybe from other cities also. So if more outlets are opened in the same city or other nearby cities, it is going to affect the customer traffic. So there is always an issue of proliferation of retail outlets, especially in case of successful franchise. Successful franchises are very attractive to start with, very expensive to construct, requires excessive initial investments, but then they easily become successful. So more outlets are also open and hence less business for the first one. So that risk is always there and has to be carefully evaluated and discussed and settled in the franchise contract. Very often in case of successful franchise contract, the franchisors are major firms. So in case of successful franchise concept, we see that the franchisor firms are multinationals, are huge firms. So franchisee are small firms. So when a small firm is negotiating a contract with a large firm, then there will always be a disadvantage for a franchisee, especially when the franchise is a famous brand worldwide. Then many potential franchises will be applying and hence even less power in those negotiations. So when the power of negotiations are not there, then the franchisee may not be able to retain a lot of profits on its own side. Bargaining power is important in determining who walks away with more profits and more benefits and privileges. So that's also a risk in franchise operations. So in this lecture and our previous lecture, we have discussed very, very important area of expanding international markets, that's through licensing and franchising, and it is imperative and critical for managers to understand thoroughly these options, their pros and their cons, because these are becoming more used, more viable ways of expanding into international markets, both from the perspective of licensors and franchisers, as well as from the perspective of licensees and franchises. Thank you for being with us today. Allah Hafiz.